April 25th, 2026. Deep within the limestone heart of London, where the traffic of the Mall hums like a distant hive, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace has reached a point of crystalline tension. To the outside world, the monarchy remains a tableau of continuity, a series of balcony appearances and rehearsed smiles. But inside the quiet corridors where power actually breathes, a revolution is taking place. It is a revolution without protesters, without banners, and without shouting. This is a revolution of ink, ledgers, and silence. What happens when the ancient machinery of a 1,000-year-old institution decides that you are no longer a necessary component? This is the question currently haunting the private quarters of Queen Camilla. For decades, she navigated the treacherous waters of public opinion to move from the most hated woman in Britain to the woman wearing the crown consort. But as we stand here in the spring of 2026, she is discovering that public acceptance was never the final boss. The final boss is the constitutional blueprint of the monarchy itself, a blueprint now being wielded with surgical precision by her stepson, the Prince of Wales. To understand the magnitude of this shift, we must look back to February of 2024. That was the year the narrative of the House of Windsor fundamentally broke. When King Charles III was diagnosed with cancer, the transition of power moved from a theoretical future event to an immediate administrative reality. While the king remained the symbolic head of state, the internal gears of the family began to grind in favor of the heir. This was not just about Prince William taking on more royal engagements. It was about the activation of the 1337 Great Charter of the Duchy of Cornwall. The Duchy of Cornwall is not merely a collection of farms and holiday cottages. It is a private empire valued at over £1 billion, generating an annual surplus of more than £21 million. For nearly 70 years, this was Charles's personal laboratory, his source of independence, and the financial engine that fueled the lives of those he held dear, including the inner circle of his wife, Camilla. But the moment William became the 25th Duke of Cornwall, that engine changed its pilot. And the new pilot has a very different destination in mind. Imagine walking into your office of 18 years and finding that your name has been erased from the digital directory overnight. No meeting, no handshake, no gold watch. This is exactly what happened to Annabel Elliot, the Queen's younger sister. For nearly 2 decades, Annabel was the chief aesthetic force behind the duchy's interior design. Her touch was everywhere from the high-end cottages in Cornwall to the office suites in the Isles of Scilly. She was more than an employee. She was a bridge between the Queen's private family and the institutional wealth of the crown. However, when the financial records for the 2023 to 2024 cycle were released, the silence was deafening. The name Annabel Elliot was gone. The payment lines that once moved 6-figure sums for her services had been closed. This was the first major signal that William was not interested in maintaining the family business atmosphere that his father had cultivated. Under William's leadership, the duchy is being run with the cold efficiency of a Fortune 500 company. If a role does not serve the long-term strategic vision of the future king, it is deleted. But why does this matter so much? Why is the removal of a designer a seismic event? Because in the royal world, access is the only true currency. By removing Camilla's sister from the payroll, William did more than save a few £100,000. He signaled to the entire household that the Queen Consort's influence has a hard boundary. He proved that her power is rented, not owned, and the lease is controlled by him. As of today, April 23, 2026, the king's health continues to be the central sun around which all these planets orbit. Every day that Charles spends in recovery or limited duty is a day that William's administrative shadow grows longer. We are witnessing the emergence of a shadow king, a successor who is not waiting for the crown to begin reshaping the kingdom. The tension is no longer just a whisper behind closed doors. It is visible in the tactical moves surrounding Mill House, Camilla's private sanctuary in Wiltshire. It is felt in the way the sovereign grant is being reviewed, with every penny of funding for the Queen's companions being scrutinized under William's net zero and value for money mandates. The Prince of Wales is building a monarchy that is leaner, faster, and arguably much colder. In this opening chapter of our investigation, we are peeling back the velvet curtain to reveal a struggle for survival. Camilla Parker Bowles spent 30 years trying to get into this family. She endured the tabloid wars of the 90s and the cold shoulder of the Queen Mother. She finally reached the summit. But as the wind whistles through the corridors of power in 2026, she is realizing that the summit is a very lonely and very precarious place to be. The map of the monarchy is fracturing. The old alliances that held firm for the last 2 decades are dissolving. And at the center of it all stands a prince who remembers the past perfectly, but is focused entirely on a future where the old rules of favoritism no longer apply. This is the moment the shield around the Queen Consort begins to crack. Stay with us, because what we found in the secret charters and land registry filings of 2025 and 2026 proves that the real battle for the future of the British throne isn't being fought in the process. Headlines, it's being fought in the fine print. Welcome to the beginning of the end of the era of influence. Let us look closer at the 1337 charter that changed everything. To understand the cold precision of the current power shift in 2026, we must travel back nearly 7 centuries. Most people believe that the British royal family is a singular unit, a family governed by the king. But the law tells a much more complicated story. There exists a legal ghost, a dormant authority that lives within a scroll of vellum signed in 1337 by King Edward III. This is the Great Charter of the Duchy of Cornwall, and in the hands of Thonvung William, it has become the most formidable weapon in the palace. The 1337 charter was designed with a very specific, almost paranoid purpose, to ensure that the heir to the throne would never be a beggar to the reigning monarch. It created a corporation soul, a private estate that exists outside the reach of Parliament, and crucially, outside the direct control of the king himself. When Queen Elizabeth II passed away in September 2022, this medieval mechanism triggered instantly. It didn't wait for a coronation. It didn't ask for permission. It moved £1 billion of assets and 135,000 acres of land directly into William's hands. As we observe the landscape of the monarchy in April 2026, the fallout of this transition is becoming undeniable. For over 5 decades, Charles had used the duchy as his personal laboratory for architecture, farming, and social philosophy. But more importantly, he used it to support his domestic life. The duchy's payroll was the invisible thread that stitched Camilla's world into the fabric of the state. Because the duchy is private, Charles could appoint whoever he wished. He could hire his friends, his loyalists, and his in-laws, such as Annabel Elliot, without the public scrutiny that follows the sovereign grant. But William, the 25th Duke of Cornwall, has spent the last 3 years proving that he does not view this inheritance as a family piggy bank. He views it as a sovereign investment fund. Since taking control, William has initiated what palace insiders call the Great Audit. Behind the scenes, every contract signed during his father's long tenure has been laid out on a cold table. Every payment, every consulting fee, and every honorary role has been weighed against a new, unforgiving metric: institutional necessity versus personal sentiment. This is where the friction begins. In the old system, loyalty was rewarded with longevity. If you were a friend of the family, you had a job for life. But in the 2026 era of the monarchy, William is operating under a different set of pressures. He is preparing for a reign that must survive in a world of extreme transparency and economic scrutiny. He knows that the public will not tolerate a monarchy that looks like a country club for the elite. Under the authority of the 1337 Charter, William has the absolute right to terminate any arrangement within the duchy without explaining himself to his father. This creates a fascinating and tense dynamic at the heart of the Shadow King narrative. While King Charles III sits on the throne and manages the ceremonial life of the nation, his son sits on the pile of gold that funds their private existence. Think about the psychological weight of that. Every time Queen Camilla suggests a renovation or a new project for a royal property tied to the duchy, she is no longer asking her husband for a favor. She is effectively asking her stepson, and William's answers, increasingly, are grounded in the language of net zero targets and strategic realignment. If an expense doesn't help end homelessness or promote sustainable urban development, William's 2 signature pillars, it is often met with a polite but firm no. By early 2026, the results of this administrative hardening were clear. The duchy's financial reports now reflect a portfolio that is being stripped of its lifestyle expenses. The removal of Annabel Elliot from the payroll wasn't an isolated incident. It was the headline of a much larger story. Dozens of long-standing roles that once served the comfort of the Cornwall household under Charles have been quietly phased out. The 1337 Charter allows William to be the boss in a way that he cannot be anywhere else. He cannot tell his father how to run the Commonwealth, but he can decide who designs the kitchens in the Isles of Scilly. By exercising this granular control, he is slowly but surely dismantling the support system that Camilla spent 20 years building. Observers have noted that this is a bloodless coup. There are no arguments in the hallways of Sandringham, no dramatic confrontations over tea. Instead, there is simply the arrival of a new set of accountants and the expiration of old contracts. The power of the 1337 Charter is that it requires no noise. It is a machine that runs on the cold logic of inheritance. As we move deeper into 2026, the question is no longer whether William will change the monarchy. The question is how much of the old world will be left by the time he actually wears the crown. The shield that once protected the queen consort's inner circle has been replaced by a ledger, and the ledger has no room for family favors. The map of the monarchy isn't just fracturing, it is being redrawn by a man who prefers the clarity of a balance sheet to the messiness of tradition. And he has a 700-year-old piece of parchment to prove he has the right to do it. There is a specific kind of violence found in a financial ledger, a silent, bureaucratic erasure that speaks louder than any public argument. As we navigate the late spring of 2026, the disappearance of one particular name from the royal accounts has become the smoking gun in the quiet war between the Prince of Wales and the Queen Consort. That name is Annabel Elliot. To the casual observer, Annabel Elliot was simply the sister of the Queen. But to those who understand the intricate plumbing of royal finances, she was a symbol of the Charles Camilla era. For 18 years, Annabel served as the chief interior designer for the Duchy of Cornwall. Her influence was woven into the very fabric of the estate. When you walked into a high-end holiday cottage in Lostwithiel or an upgraded office suite in the Isles of Scilly, you were walking through a space curated by Annabel's aesthetic. She was the bridge between the private tastes of the royal couple and the institutional assets of the crown. Between the years of 2005 and 2022, the duchy paid Annabel's firm hundreds of thousands of pounds. In some cycles, the invoices exceeded £100,000 for a single year of consulting and decorating. This arrangement was never a secret, but it was always comfortable. It was a family-first model of management that King Charles had practiced for decades. But as the 2023 to 2024 financial records were finalized and released, the world witnessed a cold, administrative execution. The name Annabel Elliot had vanished. There was no press release thanking her for nearly 2 decades of service. There was no retirement ceremony at Highgrove. The line item simply ceased to exist. This was the first time the public saw the true edge of Thonvung William's authority. As the 25th Duke of Cornwall, William had the power to review every contract, and he used it to send a message that was heard clearly in every corner of the palace. Royal commentator Emmy Griffiths noted that this wasn't just a cost-cutting measure, it was a boundary-setting exercise. By removing his stepmother's sister from the payroll, William was effectively amputating Camilla's reach into the duchy's operations. The psychological impact of this move cannot be overstated. Christopher Anderson, a seasoned chronicler of the royal family, has often described the relationship between William and Camilla as one of cold tolerance. He suggests that Camilla has long felt intimidated by her stepson's intense focus and his uncompromising nature. In 2026, that intimidation has likely turned into a stark realization of her own vulnerability. If William is willing to remove her sister, a woman who was practically a fixture of the estate, what does that say about his plans for the rest of Camilla's inner circle? However, the story has a fascinating layer of complexity. While William purged Annabel from the Duchy of Cornwall, she did not disappear from the king's life entirely. Reports from early 2026 confirm that Annabel continues to work on private projects at Balmoral and Sandringham estates that are owned personally by King Charles, not the crown or the duchy. This creates a bizarre, bifurcated reality within the monarchy. When the king and queen are at their private homes, they are surrounded by the people they trust and the designers they love. But the moment they step into the institutional world, the world controlled by William's Shadow King administration, those people are persona non grata. It is as if William has drawn a circle around the institution and said, "My father's sentimentality ends at this line." This great audit led by William is often framed by palace insiders as an effort to modernize. With his eyes on the 2030s, William is obsessed with the idea of a lean monarchy. He knows that in an era of economic hardship for many British citizens, the sight of a queen's sister receiving 6-figure sums from a royal estate is a public relations nightmare waiting to happen. He is cleaning the house before he moves in, making sure there are no skeletons of nepotism left in the closets. But for Camilla, this is more than just PR. It is the dismantling of her support system. Annabel was not just a decorator, she was a confidant, a set of eyes and ears within the vast machinery of the duchy. By removing her, William has effectively blinded and deafened Camilla to the inner workings of the estate that funds her lifestyle. Joe Little, the editor of Majesty magazine, has pointed out that the Duke of Cornwall holds the final say over all such appointments. There is no appeal process. The king cannot overrule his son's management of the duchy without sparking a constitutional crisis. Therefore, Charles is forced to watch in silence as his son systematically unpicks the network he spent 50 years knitting together. As we stand here on April 23, 2026, the erasure of Annabel Elliot stands as a masterclass in how power is exercised in the modern era. It isn't done with a sword or a shout, it is done by closing a payroll entry. It is a reminder that in the House of Windsor, your proximity to the throne only matters if the person sitting on the next throne wants you there. And for those in Camilla's world, the message from the heir is clear. The era of family favors is officially over. But as the door closes on Annabel, another door is being locked elsewhere. To see the full scale of Camilla's retreat, we have to look away from the ledgers of London and toward the quiet hills of Wiltshire to a property known as Ray Mill House, because that is where the Queen is building her true fortress. While the world watches the grand theater of the monarchy from the gates of Buckingham Palace, the most significant movement of the 2026 royal calendar isn't happening on a balcony. It is happening in a quiet corner of Wiltshire, at a country estate known as Ray Mill House. To understand why this house is the center of a silent constitutional storm, we have to look at what it represents: the ultimate exit strategy. Ray Mill House was purchased by Camilla Parker Bowles in 1996, following her divorce from Andrew Parker Bowles. At the time, she paid approximately £850,000 for the property. In the mid-90s, this was her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the relentless glare of the global media during the most turbulent years of her relationship with the then Prince of Wales. Unlike Clarence House, Highgrove, or Sandringham, Ray Mill does not belong to the crown. It does not belong to the duchy. It belongs to her. As of April 23, 2026, this private ownership has become a crucial piece of the power puzzle. While Thunvung William has been busy tightening the screws on the Duchy of Cornwall's finances, a very different kind of paperwork has been moving through the land registry. In early 2026, records indicated a shift in how Ray Mill is managed. The property was moved into a family arrangement involving her children, Laura Lopes and Tom Parker Bowles. Why does this matter right now? Because in the high-stakes game of royal succession, Camilla is playing a game of permanent versus temporary. She knows that her title of Queen Consort is temporary. She knows that her residency at Clarence House is temporary. But Ray Mill is permanent. By securing this estate and involving her children in its legal structure, she is ensuring that no matter how cold the wind blows from Kensington Palace, she has a fortress that William cannot touch. But there is a deeper, more expensive layer to this story that reveals just how much King Charles III is worried about his wife's future security. In 2025, a mysterious transaction took place. A neighboring property known as the Old Mill, which sits directly on the boundary of Camilla's estate, was purchased for £3.75 million. The buyer wasn't listed as a person, but as Frieza Nominees Limited, a private shell company often used to shield the king's private investments. The purchase was linked back to James Chalmers, the keeper of the Privy Purse. The objective was simple: defense. There were rumors that the land could be turned into a hotel or a commercial venue, which would have shattered the privacy of Ray Mill. By spending nearly £4 million of his private wealth, Charles built a buffer zone around his wife's sanctuary. This purchase tells us everything about the current state of the monarchy in 2026. It shows a king who is acutely aware that the institutional protection he provides will one day vanish. He is using his remaining time and his private fortune to build a wall around Camilla that will survive his reign. He is, in effect, fighting a silent battle against the clock and perhaps against the future intentions of his own heir. The tension between the institutional William and the private Charles is palpable here. William is cutting costs, removing Camilla's sister from payrolls, and demanding value for money. Meanwhile, Charles is spending millions to ensure his wife has a place to go when the crown eventually passes to Catherine. It is a dual-track monarchy. One side is preparing for a lean, modernized future, while the other is frantically trying to preserve a shred of private dignity for the woman who has been at the center of his life for 50 years. In 2026, royal observers have noted that Camilla spends more and more time at Ray Mill, often leaving the king at Sandringham or Highgrove. To some, this looks like a marriage in retreat, but the reality is much more strategic. Ray Mill is the only place where she isn't the queen consort under the watchful eye of William's auditors. At Ray Mill, she is simply a mother and grandmother. She is in a space where the 1337 Charter has no jurisdiction. However, the Ray Mill retreat also highlights a painful constitutional truth. Under British tradition, Camilla can never be Queen Mother. That title was reserved for Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon because she was the mother of the reigning queen. Camilla is the stepmother of the future king, and the history of stepmothers in royal lineages is often fraught with exclusion. By early 2026, the reality has set in. When Charles is gone, Camilla will likely be expected to vanish from public life. The transfer of Raymil to her children is the final seal on that reality. It is an acknowledgement that the royal firm is no longer her family business. It is now William's business. And as we see from the erasure of her sister and the audit of her household, William is a very different kind of CEO. As we move into the fifth part of our investigation, we have to ask, what is the ultimate goal of William's net zero monarchy? Is he truly just a modernizer, or is he systematically dismantling the legacy of the woman he once saw as the intruder in his parents' marriage? The answer lies in the radical changes coming to the sovereign grant changes that will redefine what it means to be a working royal in the 2030s. The fortress at Raymil is ready, but the storm is only just beginning. If Thane Vung William is the new chief executive officer of Windsor Incorporated, then as of April 23, 2026, he is overseeing the most radical software update in the history of the firm. While the public sees a family, William sees a legacy that must be future-proofed. And in his vision of the future, the operating system of the monarchy no longer has room for the expensive, sentiment-driven traditions that defined his father's era. This isn't just about cutting costs. It is about changing the very DNA of what it means to be a royal in the 2030s. At the heart of this transformation is William's aggressive net zero mandate. On the surface, it is a noble environmental goal, a pledge to make the royal estates carbon neutral by 2032. But look closer, and you will see that net zero has become a powerful administrative scythe. In the hands of the Prince of Wales, environmentalism is the perfect justification for austerity. For decades, the Queen Consort's world was one of traditional luxury. Private helicopter flights between estates, a vast network of heated rooms and sprawling palaces, and a fleet of high-emission vehicles for her security detail and staff. Under the new William OS, every one of these luxuries is being re-evaluated through the lens of a carbon footprint. By early 2026, we have seen a significant reduction in the number of private flights authorized for the Queen's household. When William denies a request for a private jet, he isn't being mean to his stepmother. He is simply protecting the 2032 targets. It is a masterclass in using modern values to enforce ancient power dynamics. But the most significant shift is happening within the sovereign grant, the taxpayer-funded pot that pays for the official duties of the working royals. In 2025 and 2026, a quiet but intense review was conducted between the Treasury and the keeper of the Privy Purse. The influence of the Prince of Wales was felt on every page of that report. William is pushing for what he calls a meritocratic monarchy. In this model, funding is not a birthright. It is an allocation based on measurable impact. This brings us to the Queen's companions, the modern replacement for the traditional ladies-in-waiting. When Camilla introduced this role, it was seen as a way to keep her inner circle close while appearing more modern. However, as of April 2026, the funding for these positions has come under unprecedented scrutiny. William's auditors are asking a cold corporate question: what is the return on investment for a companion? By squeezing the budget for Camilla's personal staff, William is effectively thinning the velvet wall that protects her, making her household more transparent and more dependent on his approval. This leads to the most delicate and perhaps the most brutal part of the 2026 reality: the constitutional isolation of the Queen Consort. In the history of the British monarchy, there is a massive difference between a Queen Mother and a Queen Dowager. Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, the mother of Queen Elizabeth II, enjoyed 50 years of immense power and a nearly unlimited budget because she was the mother of the reigning sovereign. She was a pillar of the institution until the day she died at 101 years old. Camilla will never have that shield. Because she is not William's mother, her legal status upon the death of King Charles will be that of a Queen Dowager, a title of high dignity but zero constitutional authority. William is making sure that this distinction is being hard-coded into the royal operating system right now. He is not waiting for the transition to occur, he is setting the permissions today. By dismantling her duchy-funded support network and tightening the sovereign grant, he is ensuring that when the crown passes to him, there will be no rival court at Clarence House. There will be only one center of power, his. The contrast between the two men at the top of the hierarchy has never been more visible than it is on this 23rd of April. King Charles is a man of the 18th century, a lover of history, ritual, and personal loyalty. He believes in the human monarchy. William, however, is a man of the 21st century, He believes in the corporate monarchy. He sees the institution as a brand that must be managed with the same cold efficiency as a global tech giant. This corporate approach is why the removal of people like Annabel Elliot happened with so little noise. In a corporation, when a contractor no longer fits the strategic direction, they are let go. There is no sentiment, only the balance sheet. Camilla, who spent 30 years fighting to be accepted by the family, is now discovering that she didn't marry into a family, she married into a structure. And that structure is currently being renovated from the top down. As we move toward the final chapter of our investigation, we see a monarchy that is leaner, greener, and much more controlled. The Shadow King has successfully used the fine print of charters and the language of modern sustainability to redraw the boundaries of royal influence. Camilla remains a queen, but her world is shrinking. The silence in the hallways of Buckingham Palace in 2026 is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of a system that has been successfully reprogrammed. In our final part, we will ask the ultimate question: who will be the last one standing when the music stops, and what will be left of the Windsor legacy? As we reach the evening of April 23rd, 2026, a strange and heavy stillness has settled over the gardens of Clarence House. The news cycles continue to churn with reports of the king's slow but steady recovery, and the public remains focused on the gold-trimmed ceremonies of state. But for those who have followed the paper trail, we have uncovered the secret charters from 1337, the closed payrolls of 2024, and the private land transfers of 2026. The reality is undeniable. The era of the extended royal family is over. The era of the lean corporate monarchy has begun. The story we have tracked is not one of a loud, dramatic palace coup involving midnight arrests or public scandals. Instead, it is a story of administrative displacement. Thun Vung William has proven himself to be a master of the quiet shift. By the time the crown is actually placed upon his head, the monarchy will have already been rebuilt in his image. He has successfully utilized the 3-year window since 2023 to act as a shadow king, using the immense financial power of the Duchy of Cornwall to prune the family tree of any branches he deems unnecessary or overly expensive. In this final assessment, we must look at the human cost of this institutional precision. Queen Camilla stands as the most poignant figure in this transition. She is a woman who spent more than 30 years fighting for a seat at the table, only to find that the table is being sold off for parts by her successor. As of today, her influence is almost entirely dependent on the heartbeat of her husband. Behind her, the sister she relied on for 18 years has been erased from the official books. Beside her, the companions she hoped would form her own court are being scrutinized by accountants. And ahead of her lies the quiet, isolated life of a queen dowager in a house in Wiltshire that she had to legally secure for her own children just to ensure it stayed within her family. This is the ultimate paradox of the Windsor legacy in 2026. To save the monarchy, William believes he must make it less of a family and more of a firm. He looks at the long reign of his grandmother, Elizabeth II, and sees a model of duty that was occasionally clouded by the personal desires and financial entanglements of her relatives. William's solution is a meritocracy where the only people on the payroll are those who serve the strategic vision. If that means removing his stepmother's sister or tightening the belt on the queen consort's travel budget, he views it as a necessary sacrifice for the survival of the crown in the 2030s. But as the map of the monarchy fractures quietly, one must ask, what is lost when the sentiment is stripped away? The British monarchy has survived for a millennium, not because it was the most efficient business in the world, but because it was a grand, messy, and deeply human soap opera that the public felt invested in. By turning the institution into a high-performance corporate entity, William risks losing the very magic that Walter Bagehot once warned should not be let in upon the daylight. When every decision is made by a ledger and every role is justified by a net-zero target, the royals become less like symbols of a nation and more like the board of directors of a very old, very wealthy utility company. King Charles III, ever the romantic and the traditionalist, has spent his remaining strength trying to bridge these two worlds. He has used his private wealth to buy buffer zones around Camilla's home and has kept his loyalists on his personal payroll at Sandringham. But he is a man fighting the tide. The constitutional machinery activated by that 1337 charter is too powerful and too automatic to be stopped by the wishes of a single monarch. The authority is already passed. The crown is merely waiting to catch up. As we look toward the remainder of 2026, we expect to see more disappearances from the royal accounts. We expect the sovereign grant to be further refined, focusing almost exclusively on the Prince and Princess of Wales and their children. The slimmed-down monarchy that was once just a talking point is now a mathematical reality. Camilla Parker Bowles, the woman who survived the tabloid wars of the 90s, finds herself in her most precarious position, yet not because she is hated, but because she is being made redundant by the logic of the future. So, who is the last one standing when the music stops? It is William. He stands at the center of a £1 billion empire, backed by ancient law and modern management theory, ready to lead a monarchy that is leaner, colder, and entirely under his control. He has shown that he is willing to be the villain in the eyes of his father's inner circle, if it means being the savior of the institution's credibility. The silence we hear coming from the palace walls tonight is the sound of the new world being built. It is the sound of old contracts expiring and new boundaries being drawn. The shield around the queen consort hasn't just cracked, it has been replaced by a mirror, reflecting a future where loyalty is measured in value for money and influence is a privilege that can be revoked with the click of a mouse. What do you think of Than Vung William's bloodless coup? Is he the visionary leader the monarchy needs to survive the 21st century? Or has he been too too ruthless in his treatment of those who served his father for decades? Does Camilla deserve a more secure place in the future of the firm? Or is her retreat to Ray Mill House the natural conclusion of her controversial journey? The halls of power are quiet, but the ledger is never closed. We want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive into the hidden architecture of the 2026 monarchy insightful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more investigative reports from the heart of the palace. The crown never sleeps, and neither do we. Thank you for watching.